Hi, everyone, and welcome to AFI Fest 2020, presented by Audi. My name is Malin, and I'm a programmer with the festival. Before we begin today's discussion, I would just like to thank all of our supporters, our presenting sponsor, Audi, our AFI members, as well as you, our audience. Thank you so much for tuning into this very special virtual edition of AFI Fest. You should have all just seen the Discovery Productions 4K restoration of Out of the Blue, which world premiered at the 2019 Venice Film Festival and was set to premiere in the US at the South by Southwest Film Festival before the event was unfortunately canceled. But 2020 also marks the 40th anniversary of the film's original premiere at the 1980 Cannes Film Festival. I am pleased to have here with me today John Allen Simon and Elizabeth Karr from Discovery Productions to discuss this incredible film and their efforts towards reintroducing it to the world with this stunning restoration. Thank you both so much for taking the time to speak with me today.
Thank you, Malin, and we're really pleased that it's having its U.S. premiere at AFI Fest. We're here in Los Angeles and big supporters of AFI.
Great to be here, and yeah, we loved screening at AFI.
Well, we love having you and having this film in particular. I just want to say I really appreciate how you included the introductory text laying out kind of the history of this film and the context of its release, because I think it's particularly important in this instance. This is a film that went unseen by the public for decades until you undertook the 35mm restoration. And then, of course, it became difficult to see again when many theaters stopped projecting film. So this digital restoration and eventual release will be the de facto way that the film is introduced to most who will see it. I just want to, begin this conversation by talking a little bit more in depth about how the film was initially received and why it's an important piece in the story of Dennis Hopper.
Well, back in 1982, Out of the Blue had been shelved for 2 years following its premiere at the Cannes Film Festival. The movie had been controversial, not only because of the film itself, how strong it is and powerful, but also because it had been made in Vancouver back in 1979 when it was a tax shelter production, which meant that the Canadian investors in the movie were essentially guaranteed a tax write-off that made the movie's investment profitable for them, whether or not the movie ever made a penny. What went wrong with that was that the production manager, the executive producer, Paul Lewis, came into Dennis Hopper's trailer about a week into shooting. Dennis had been hired just to play Linda Manz's father in the movie, to say that nothing was usable. He was shutting down the production. Dennis and Linda were going to get paid and everyone was going to go home. And Dennis said, let me look at the footage. He concluded nothing was usable. Of course, he did perhaps have a motive in saying that, one must add in the interest of fairness. And he said, I'll take over the film. If I can start from scratch, rewrite the script over the weekend, we can just start shooting again Monday. And he took what was initially kind of an after-school kind of G-rated movie and turned it into what was, at least initially when we got a rating, an X-rated punk rock nihilistic masterpiece. It had no punk element in it at all, and it did not have the drug scenes, and it just didn't have most of the elements that make this movie so unique. So it lost its Canadian certification. So from a guaranteed profit, the investors went to a guaranteed total loss and write-off. So the financiers and the filmmakers were kind of at war. I had distributed a shelved film called The Wicker Man and gotten a lot of attention for doing that. I was deluged with all these lost, unloved movies, and Out of the Blue was one of them. And when I saw it, I kind of fell out of my seat at how great it was. I worked out a compromise between the filmmakers and the financiers, and Dennis and I took it on the road around the U.S., which was really an important experience for me, both as a filmmaker and personally. And it got off to a good start because Dennis came over to our little offices in Beverly Hills, which were on a rooftop, and he said, "Oh wow, this is where our production office was for Easy Rider." So we kind of hit it off. Dennis's career was really at a low ebb at that point. But the movie broke house records in Boston. We were the top grossing screen in New York when we opened. It was kind of a handcrafted distribution. And one of the things I'm proudest of was that it sort of relaunched Dennis's languishing career as a director. Sean Penn saw it when we played in LA, and they formed a very tight, close friendship for the rest of Dennis's life. And it led to Sean lobbying for Dennis to direct his Ryan movie with Robert Duvall, Colors.
Yeah, I love actually that John and Dennis did indie guerrilla distribution before it really was a thing. You know, because they would go city to city, it became an event, and Dennis and you would do the Q&As after the screenings. I don't know how common that was back then, but I don't know. I just, and from those screenings, the film developed a lot of fans and admirers. But, you know, it really wasn't available to be seen. When we did the restoration of the negative, it screened all over the world, at BAM, at Metrograph, different festivals. People love the film, but then it's not accessible to everyone. So that was why we wanted to do the 4K restoration, so that the world could be reintroduced to it and the people who love it could see it in a pristine, beautiful version.
Yeah, we had initially done a home video release, both video cassette back then, and then later in around 1999, we did a DVD release in America. But after that, we kind of rested it and did continue to play the few prints we had at revival houses. And in 2008, Cinémathèque Française and the Thompson Foundation joined forces with us to do a negative restoration. And 10 years later, the two prints we struck, one in Europe that we keep archived at Cinémathèque Française, and the other here in the US that we, as Elizabeth said, we played at Anthology Film Archives and other very prestigious theater and mostly museum kind of venues, was starting to get damaged. And we looked for some foundation funding to do a digital restoration, but there wasn't any to be found. So we decided to take a leap of faith and do it ourselves. And Elizabeth spearheaded a Kickstarter campaign that was incredibly successful and really kind of garnered attention and pulled together all the people who love this movie. I like to say that Out of the Blue is kind of like the Velvet Underground. Only 1,000 people may have bought their albums when they were a band, but half of them went out and started their own rock groups.
That's a great analogy. Just going back to this, you know, this Canadian production that Dennis Hopper took over, was Linda Manz already attached at that point?
Yes, it's really remarkable because I think I was a film critic initially in New Orleans, and before that, when I was a student and an editor of the Harvard Crimson. But yeah, it's one of the greatest, in my opinion, greatest father-daughter castings of all time. She was already in the movie. But I think, you know, from getting to know Linda over the years, who sadly passed away last month, we got to spend a day with her up at her house in Palmdale and have a really nice lunch with her back in February, just before the shutdown. But she was not really a trained actress, and I think, you know, my guess is that a lot of the footage, all of which was her stuff. The first-time director who was shooting the movie before he was fired, and Dennis took it over. I think it must have been pretty difficult for him to get a good performance out of her, the kind that he wanted for the kind of movie he was making. She had done Terrence Malick's Days of Heaven, and I think you know, Malick hadn't planned on her doing the narration. That kind of developed. And I think he just created the kind of set as an indie filmmaker, the kind of thing that Cassavetes would do, where he was able to really kind of let her be herself. And Dennis, as a great actor and great filmmaker, really knew how to do that with Out of the Blue too. Dennis told me that he would really kind of tell her exactly how he wanted her to move, and then try to make her interested in it enough and take enough from her own experience to make it seem real. And that was one of his great strengths as a filmmaker. Not an easy task for a first time filmmaker.
And also remember, he having gotten to know and really admire Linda's rawness and authenticity during those couple weeks of the initial shoot, when he rewrote the script, he tailored it for her. He incorporated her love of punk rock music, her fascination with Elvis, you know, just all.
No, the Elvis stuff was in it, but he learned
sorry.
that she played the drums and
Right.
put them in her room so she could play them. And of course, during that weekend, fortuitously, Dennis Hopper's friend Neil Young's song "Out of the Blue," "My Hey Hey," came on the radio, and for some reason it just clicked with Dennis that this would be kind of the anthem of the movie, and he could interweave it thematically in so many ways. One of the great experiences, you know, working and becoming friends with Dennis, was he had done Neil Young's Human Highway right around that same time, which was another shelved, unreleased film, and I got to you know, watch it with Neil and Dennis and talk with Neil about it. And
But you didn't take that one on.
no, I didn't. That one was too. I couldn't really see a way to gain an audience for it. I think that because I knew Out of the Blue would find the kind of audience of film lovers that, you know, was close to my own taste, and would also get amazing reviews, which it did, from Roger Ebert and from USA Today and all over the country. Boston Globe got amazing reviews. As a former film critic, I kind of knew that it would play in that way. And once you get those kinds of reviews, or at least back at that time, before everyone was a reviewer who had a phone, you know, you could sustain you know, an engagement. So in Boston at the Coolidge Corner Cinema, we played for 10 weeks in one theater and broke the house record. One of the other great experiences was that Dennis used to tell me that his friends Jack and Warren were big fans of the film, to the point, you know, where it annoyed me. And I said, well, what are Jack Nicholson and Warren Beatty going to do to help? He said, oh, you don't understand. Jack has this little notebook with all of his friends' names in it. And if you ask him a favor, he takes out the notebook right in front of you, shows you where your name is in the notebook, takes out a pen, crosses it out, and does you the favor. So I said, well, time to call in that favor, Dennis. So we went up to Nicholson's house in Aspen, had an amazing time up there for a weekend. I recorded the conversations in which I tried to steer them, having been a journalist, towards Out of the Blue, and got enough in the conversation that I could cut together an amazing radio spot. There was a DVD extra and will be a Blu-ray extra again when we put it out, of Nicholson talking about the movie, saying, I've never endorsed anything, not even of my own, but if a masterpiece comes along, people ought to see it.
Wow, that's wonderful. I'm glad you mentioned it'll be an extra, because I definitely want to see that. But you mentioned Human Highway, which was recently restored, and the last movie was also recently restored. And, you know, it's really great that you guys have taken on this restoration, because people will get to appreciate, you know, especially Linda Manz's role in this. But, you know, I just want to kind of think more about the kind of larger cultural sphere and how you see this film kind of changing, you know, in reception based on the, you know, 1980, the 2008, and the 2020 release now.
Yeah, well, I think that I think one of the reasons why this film, we did gather this sort of mighty army, which, as John just alluded to, Natasha Lyonne and Chloe Sevigny have joined forces with us, and they're presenting the restoration with us. Sadly, babysitter issues, they couldn't be with us in our little talk today. But I think that the film is more relevant today than ever, because as Dennis Hopper, I'm paraphrasing, you know, he says it's about the crash and burn of the American dream. And this is uncomfortable to watch, but this is what's happening right now. And in an interview with Kenneth Turan in 83, excuse me, he said, I think maybe this is my best film ever. It's raw, it's difficult, but this is where we are. And I think people respond to both the strength and the vulnerability of Cebe. I mean, John, who was the lead producer on the restoration, has seen the film and has been with Dennis all the way, has seen the film many, many more times than I have, but I've seen it a lot too. And I never tire of watching her. I'm absolutely mesmerized. And Sharon Farrell too, the relation between that mother and daughter and the frustration Don feels. I think people get that right now. And I think that Dennis Hopper's directing artistry makes us almost like we're eavesdropping, but it's not a comfortable film, a place to live in, but we're not in a comfortable place to live in right now. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's resonated with people over the years. In fact, how Natasha Lyonne came to join us on this is I was driving to an appointment and I was listening to Fresh Air on KCRW, and Natasha Lyonne was on talking about Russian Doll, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, she talks about this incredible film, out of the blue, Dennis Hopper, oh man, Linda Manz, and I'm like, our people, you know. And then Kismet, I saw her at a luncheon, you know, I think the next week, and Chloe had worked with Linda and loves Linda Manz, you know, fierce. I mean, they are so of a threesome, Natasha and Linda and Chloe, that same kind of independent spirit. And in fact, Chloe has Linda's jacket from the movie, the iconic, the Elvis, when she's hitchhiking. Anyway, they both came on board, and we couldn't be, you know, more proud and delighted to have them with us. And but yeah, and when we were doing the Kickstarter, people would come out, oh, I love this movie. I have this old gritty VHS copy. Are you going to do a Blu-ray? Yeah, we're going to do a Blu-ray. And then, of course, the bootlegs, you know, which particularly with, you know, both of us, but with John, drives us crazy, because don't you realize every time you pirate the movie, you know, you're preventing things like this from going forward and being restored. But it's one of the best things about this, besides the movie having this stunning restoration now, is the people we've met along the way. I mean, just, you know, fellow travelers, lovers of film, and rebels, you know, mavericks, because Dennis and Linda, they didn't have a huge body of work. Dennis as an actor, he certainly did, but as a director, not. And Linda, you know, very small, but I mean, powerful. I don't know of, she's right up there with any actress in terms of having an impact as a performer. Between Days of Heaven and Out of the Blue, you know, I just never tire of watching it, as sad as it is. But I think that's kind of where we are. I want to see what happens now where we are. But
you know, it's funny, when Dennis and I were going around the country, we're both huge Orson Welles fans, and Dennis was working intermittently on Other Side of the Wind. He was always telling me about and talking about it. And then when I finally saw the completed version last year, I was sort of shocked to see that he was in it just for, you know, like a moment. So I'm really pleased that this Hopper Welles documentary of conversations between them came out. I remember, you know, Dennis was so influenced by Orson, and he talked about how when he had edited Easy Rider, he had edited sleeping on a mattress on the floor, and that, you know, he would never really do work he didn't want to do, or you know, he could always go back to sleeping on a mattress on the floor. And that kind of integrity and his kind of belief in the power of art really was such a strong influence on me personally, and on so many other independent filmmakers, I think. You know, Dennis, Dennis was one of the best listeners I've ever met. We always think about Dennis kind of rambling on and on, like in Apocalypse Now. But he was an amazing listener and student of human nature. And of course, his photography has gotten a lot of attention in the last couple of decades, and he had a great eye. I think that one of the reasons Out of the Blue is such a terrific movie is that he wanted his movies, he told me, to be like time capsules of their period. And in many ways, Out of the Blue is a sequel to Easy Rider, kind of picking up on the kinds of people who could have been an Easy Rider and seeing what happened to them in the 80s, which wasn't pretty, and you know, but he really captured it in a raw, powerful way that I think still speaks to audiences. The Daily Telegraph called the movie a sharp shock to complacent faith in civilization. And that's, I'm not sure altogether in a positive way, but
Yeah.
but it's one of the great quotes, and it's really accurate. This movie sets you on your heels, even 40 years later.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so glad you mentioned Hopper Wells, because we also have that film at the festival. And I think seeing these two together is really a special experience. But I do just want to thank you both for, you know, undertaking this restoration, for bringing this film back to the world, and for including it in AFI Fest. Thanks for taking the time to speak with me today. And
can I say one quick thing?
Oh, sure. Yes.
What's our website, Elizabeth?
Oh, outoftheblueDennisHopper.com. You know, we did this. This is a labor of love, and John and I were committed to seeing it through, but we didn't have foundation help this time. And so Kickstarter and our Slacker backer site, which is still up, so you can still support the film, is very much appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you say the name of the website one more time?
Yes. outoftheblueDennisHopper.com.
www.outoftheblueDennisHopper.com. Come visit us there, or the Facebook page. You know, we love to interact with fans of the movie. It's been a real adventure.
Well, thanks again, you know, for taking the time to speak with me, and thank you to everyone who is watching. We'd love to hear from you on social media at #AFIFest, and please join us for more great films and virtual events at fest.afi.com. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Malin.
Pleasure, Malin.